Our next performer is a great friend of mine, somebody that I've known for a handful of years now, but we're like brothers. And I'm actually going to take part. And it's this kind of fan fiction. Like it's not going to be as sexy as this. But we're going to tag team fan fiction this. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Kish. Dave Kish of the Renaissance Guys Michigan Renaissance Fair Troupe.
Yeah.
Rogue Blades, yeah.
Rogue Blades.
Yeah. I'm really scarred by that. In the best possible way.
Mommy.
My fan fiction that I wrote was based on something that's been very near and dear to me for almost my entire life, Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. It's kind of cool.
It's like, oh, everybody go.
Are we chanting?
Find
Gregorian
it.
chant? Stop it.
Oh, there we go.
You want to
Proceed.
All right.
Yeah, tread lightly.
So this is called the Playaz Handbook. And it's read by Dave Kish and Joe Harvey. Now, we meant to practice this, but we were so busy that we didn't get a chance to, because I came up from Toledo this afternoon. So we haven't actually had a chance to work on it. So, yeah.
We're master craftsmen.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is so,
Shall I?
you start?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me, Joe said as he walked down the stairs into the darkened basement. He heard the scrambling of papers and the slamming of hardcover books.
What? Who is it? What do you want? Dave snapped.
Hey, it's me, Joe.
The people gathered around the table squirmed and squinted at the figure approaching from the dark. When Joe appeared in the ring of light from the sole overhead fixture, they stared in disbelief. Dave stood at once. His chair fell backwards and clambered on the cement floor. Multicolored polyhedral dice dropped and spilled to the floor with the chair. He stared at Joe with a strange mixture of disbelief and a low-grade fear. You're here? He could hear the accusation in his tone, but couldn't filter it out. The three others, 2 men and 1 woman, turned their heads from the intruder back to their leader and looked at him with naked shock.
Joe and Dave stared at one another across the table scattered with hardcover books, papers, and dice. They looked like gunslingers sizing each other up across a crowded bar. But instead of there being whiskey and chipped shot glasses and piano music played gaily by a cheery fellow with a vest and string tie, the wide-eyed occupants sipped Mountain Dew from big gulp cups, while the soundtrack to Conan the Barbarian played on a laptop, with a screensaver depicting the Monty Python troupe in their Holy Grail garb. Smiled really. The two alphas narrowed their eyes, and the tension ratcheted up to almost painful proportions.
Guys, this is Joe, Dave said, proud that he was able to keep any sign of shaking out of his voice. He'll be joining us this evening. 3 sets of wide eyes looked from Dave over to Joe.
Hey, Joe said and gave a little wave.
They continued to stare at him for a few moments, and then, in unison, swiveled back to look at Dave. Each of them looked to be ready to say something, but being non-confrontational, said nothing. Dave didn't look at his crew. Instead, he tilted his head towards the stairs past Joe. Why don't you go get us some pizza, Dave suggested. Joe and I have some business first. What's he going to play? Jake asked. Dave held up a hand to his small friend, silencing him, and shook his head once. We'll let fate decide that.
Joe stepped towards the table and chairs barked as the chair skidded along the floor as the trio backed away a bit. English.
Editing.
Did I come at a bad time? Joe asked, looking around and taking in the scene. The 4 players were gathered around a rectangular surface that looked to Joe like it was a picnic table, but inside. 4 folding chairs from a card table, probably hidden in the shadows somewhere in the basement, were arranged around the table, with Dave standing and the others still seated. Joe got the distinct impression that Dave was their Gandalf, and the others were hobbits gathered around the hem of his robe. He tried not to laugh.
No, Dave replied too quickly. He swallowed and regained control. Oh, of course not. If you truly want to play, you will need a character.
Joe walked over to the table and looked down at the papers and small lead figures. Cool, Joe said, and reached down, picked up a piece of paper with the words character sheet along the top of the page. Can I use this one? He asked, picking it up and holding it under the light. His eyes scanned the page and he read the name Bindlestick the Charmer.
Jamie's eyes went wide and he looked up to Dave with pleading in his face. Dave patted the air between himself and Jamie in a calming manner. No, you cannot, Dave said. That is Jamie's character. Joe shrugged, dropped the page, letting it glide back to the surface of the table. Jamie scuttled over, snagged it up, and returned to Dave's side.
Joe cocked his head to one side and read another. Ravensmane the Sorceress? Joe read and looked at the lone female. Her eyes widened, and then Emily shook her head imperceptibly and pointed at Rick. Joe looked over at Rick and chuckled. You're playing a girl character? He asked. With eyes wide, the gaunt man slowly inched forward, pinched the corner of the character sheet between thumb and index finger, and pulled it away from Joe. He clutched it to his chest protectively. Joe raised his chin and arched his eyebrows in silent concern, but then returned to scanning the table. He looked at another character sheet, and then to Emily. That would make you, he read the name, Hub Crombag the Manslayer? Joe asked. Emily nodded once. Paging Dr. Freud, Joe said with a chuckle, looking around at all the players. Am I right? The smile fell from his face, like a high five that had been left hanging too long. He saw that no one found this joke funny. Then again, he supposed they would.
Go get the pizzas. We should be done here in 20 or 30 minutes, Dave commanded. He reached into his pocket, pulled out some bills. He flipped through them until he found a 5, held it out, and Jamie snatched it from his fingers.
Pizza? Joe said. Cool, I'm in. He dug in his pockets and pulled out a $50 bill. Do you guys have change for a 50? I just got paid, but I didn't get to the bank yet.
The 3 players leaned forward and looked at the $50 bill as if they'd never seen such wealth. We got the pizza this time, Dave said. The "we don't need your money" was left unspoken, but Dave was pretty sure he'd gotten his point across, even if Joe didn't respond. But he was pretty certain that it had stung. Their heads all snapped back to Dave, disbelief and shock on their faces. Go, Dave commanded. We'll be ready to play once you've returned with provisions. They silently got to their feet. Rick still clutched his character sheet to his chest.
You gotta know Rick. Rick is a real guy.
Yes, he is.
As is Jamie. As they filed past him, Joe smiled and nodded at each of them. Emily was last. As she passed, he winked at her. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Hey, beautiful, Joe said. Would you mind picking me up a Red Bull? I'll totally make it worth your while. She smiled shyly, nodded, and mumbled, sure. Thanks, darling. See you in a few.
Rick, Jamie, and Dave watched on in horror as Emily shyly blushed and smiled at him.
Then the trio filed up the stairs like hobbits climbing up to Mount Doom. Emily continued to steal looks back at Joe and waved awkwardly as they disappeared upstairs. Joe turned to find Dave with his arms folded.
I'm surprised that you showed up, Dave said once they were alone.
Joe shrugged. I've always wanted to try this game. You know, my dad said it was cool.
Dave half closed his eyes and received the old comment as an insult.
I mean, it's not like you can't play this kind of thing online or on a system, or probably better than anything people
Okay, your point is made. Dave held out a blank character sheet to Joe, who took it and grabbed one of the chairs and sat down and patted his pockets.
I didn't bring a pen. Can I borrow one?
Dave rolled his eyes and chuckled. How will you ever survive in a dungeon? You can't even remember a pencil? Joe watched on as Dave righted his chair and sat down. He folded up a pair of screens and 3 panels that he'd been hiding behind as Joe had arrived. He reached below the table and produced a Ticonderoga No. 2 pencil. It had been sharpened to a fine point. He held the pencil out to Joe.
Do you have any pens? Joe asked.
Dave rolled his eyes. You really don't know anything, do you? We don't use pens. Your stats, gear, weapons, and money will all change throughout the game. You don't want anything in pen.
Joe stared at the pencil, pursed his lips, and then reached out and took it from him. Thanks, Joe said. He spun the pencil around in his fingers and looked at the sheet. Okay, I'm gonna be,
Dave waved his arms. Hold on, wait. How can you decide anything about your character till you've rolled the dice?
He looked at Dave for a long moment. And then he shrugged. You're the expert, let's do this.
Dave nodded, pleased that Joe is showing proper deference for once. First, you will need to roll your stats. They are broken down into 6 divisions: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma. Dave held his fist forward, palm down.
Joe looked at him, waiting. After several moments, he bumped knuckles with Dave, and then pulled his fist back and opened his hands, spreading his fingers wide while making an explosion sound. Yeah! D&D! He said with as much fake enthusiasm as he could muster.
Dave rolled his eyes, turned his hand over, and opened it.
Joe leaned close and looked at the items Dave held in his palm. Marbles?
No, not marbles, they're dice.
Die, Joe said, and reached for the gem-colored items.
I beg your pardon?
Multiple dice are called die, Joe said slowly.
Dave glared at him.
Joe took the die from Dave and looked at him, awaiting instruction.
Now roll 4d6 for each of the attributes, Dave said, and waited for him to reply.
Roll 46 what, of these? Joe picked up all the dice and started rattling them in his hands.
Dave rolled his eyes and laughed at him in derision. You really have no clue, do you? Dave said.
Joe stopped rattling the die and smiled. I know what it's like to kiss a girl. Do you?
Dave opened his mouth and closed, but no sound came out. He was flabbergasted. I know what it's like, Dave said. Trust me, I do.
Joe nodded and smiled. Good for you. He stopped and thought a second. Then he looked over his shoulder to the stairs. Is it her? Are you a nerd girl, an item?
Her name is, Dave said.
I know what her name is, Joe said. But the question is, are you two, adventuring together?
That's none of your business, a very flustered Dave sputtered.
Joe grinned at him and arched his eyebrows.
Or just one, that's fine. Okay. That's creepy.
You dog! I won't ruin it for you. But I should warn you, she kind of hates men. Then he thought about it. Well, you should be safe. What do I know? I guess you're the one that really rolls her dice, huh? Huh?
Dave flushed and pretended that Joe had stopped speaking. Take 4 of these 6-sided die and roll them, leaving out the lowest roll. Do so 6 times and note them on a piece of paper, 1 for each of your attributes.
Joe extracted the dice and rolled them as instructed, and scrawled the numbers down on his sheet. He made lucky ooh sounds as he rolled and chuckled. When he finished, he sat back with a big grin on his face. Is it better to have high rolls or low rolls?
High, of course. Why?
Otherwise, all these 17s and 18s would have gone to waste.
Dave stood up, sending his chair tumbling a second time. He leaned forward and looked at the numbers on Joe's piece of scrap paper.
18, 17, 17, Joe read. Then he cringed. 15, bummer. Then he chippered up 18, 18. Looks pretty good, huh?
Impossible, Dave gasped. There's no way you... Joe picked up the dice and rolled them again. They tumbled to a stop. Dave looked down. 3 6s and a 5. Dave nearly sat on the floor, but remembered his chair at the last moment. He picked it up and plopped down. Arrange them where you want them in your attributes column. Give any questions.
Okay. Looks pretty easy. Strength. That's what, like physical power?
Obviously, Dave said.
Undaunted, Joe powered on. I assume the higher the better.
Yes, Dave answered.
Can you give me a real-world example of this strength?
Dave narrowed his gaze and tried to read Joe.
Like, is 18... It's like Conan the Barbarian strength. Dave nodded. And 3 would be like a toddler.
Well, Dave tried to interrupt.
That would make, like, 9 like average.
Well, yes, Dave said, but Joe kept on.
So that would mean that I would be a 13 and you're like an 8.
Now, wait a minute. The rule of thumb is how much you can military thrust over your head, that number times 10 pounds.
Woo, that means I'd be a 14.
Dave stared at Joe.
Joe flexed a double bicep at Dave. And that would make you, what, a 6?
Dave's stare turned into a glare.
Joe laughed and waved him off. Come on, pal, I'm just joking with you, Joe said, then added, but if you could push 70 pounds straight over your head, I would be amazed.
Dave opened his mouth to speak, but Joe continued.
So I'll go ahead and put an 18 for my strength. I mean, compared to the group, I'm your Superman. Next, intelligence. Probably an IQ thing, right? I would assume that 18 is like Stephen Hawking and 3 is like a feral child raised by wolves.
And you scowled. Sure, raised by wolves.
Is it 10 points of IQ for each point of intelligence? If so, man, I'm only going to be like a 10 or 11, but that would make you...
By those parameters, I would be around a 13.
It was Joe's turn to stare. He lowered his chin and looked down his nose.
What? Dave asked rather defensively.
Come on, Joe said. You do not have a 130 IQ. If so, why are you working for NASA, raking in the big science bucks?
Dave started to defend himself, but stopped. You know what? Dave said.
So, who needs to be smart? Wizards? They're like the IT nerds of the fantasy world?
Dave opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. Joe was more or less right, so he nodded.
Joe just grinned and looked down at the page. Wisdom. What is wisdom used for?
Dave chuckled. Well, of course you wouldn't know what wisdom is, Dave said to himself, silently. Then to Joe he said, where intelligence is book smarts, wisdom is more experience or philosophical intelligence. Priests need to have high wisdom.
Priests? Joe said. Can you be an altar boy too? So what does the number represent? How many altar boys?
Not that kind of priest. Dave said, let's say your character is a priest that worships a god of nature. And you're trying to cast a spell to discover...
Boring, Joe said. I'll just bury my lowest stat. I'll throw the 15 in there. I failed to see how that will help.
It's kind of important for... Dave started then shook his head. He muttered about burying his low roll.
Dexterity? Like balance and juggling.
Dave was surprised. Yes, that's exactly it.
So 18 is like Chinese acrobat or Cirque du Soleil performer.
Right, Dave said.
And 3 would be like Dungeon Master.
Dave started to reply, registered the insult, and just glared at Joe.
I'm just joking with you. Relax. Obviously, you are quite the dexterous specimen. Paused, rolled his eyes to himself.
Dave felt the compliment melt into the insult it was. You're mocking me, aren't you?
Oh, you just made your wisdom check. Nicely done.
Right there and then, he decided that Joe needed to die. He would kill him. He would wait until he wasn't expecting it, and then he would kill him. No one would be able to pin it on him. No one would ever be able to accuse Dave because the murder would be grisly and horrible. His limbs and head would be liberated from his body, and if any of the pieces could be found, none would be identified. After all, trolls and dragons were vicious and unpredictable. Dave smiled at him. You're quite the jester, he said. We've needed that in this group for a while.
Joe smiled back with complete trust.
Good. So much the better, Dave thought. So much the better.
Constitution? Joe said, moving on.
You could hear the utter lack of understanding in his voice. Dave couldn't wait to hear the stupid suggestion about to ooze out of Joe's testosterone-fueled, pea-sized brain. But his jaw dropped open when Joe leveled him with an amazing description. That's the part that got you. Not the death part.
This must refer to your physical constitution, your health, overall well-being. It's probably pretty hard to quantify. I'd say top-tier athletes as opposed to, say, Joe paused while considering the other end of his metaphor.
Dave was reluctantly impressed. That was until he completed the thought.
Role-playing gamers in a basement during a beautiful summer day.
You are welcome to leave, Dave said. You can pack up your crappy attitude, your superhuman character, and cram them with walnuts, jerk. We don't need nor want you or any of your kind here. I'm sorry that I ever invited you. But what he said out loud was, ha, ha, ha.
Joe scribbled down a number and then read the last one.
Dave was already cringing.
Charisma. Joe read, looking down at the word, then he read it again. Charisma.
Dave looked down and pretended to be reading something very important in an upside-down player's handbook.
So, Joe said with a chuckle in his voice, I would assume an 18 charisma would be a charming person, or at least a stirring one. Don Juan with women, or Hitler for Germany, for example?
Dave didn't look up. He just kept running his fingertips over upside down and unhopeful paragraphs.
Right? And the lower numbers might be represented by people like, he snickered, fake coughed and cleared his throat. I don't know, maybe like some people who, like Gollum, shone the light and started giggling.
All right, that's more than enough. I know where you are going, Dave interjected, tired of the slights.
Do you? Joe asked, his Joker-like smile spreading across his face.
I'm sure that I do, Dave said.
I'm pretty sure you don't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I see where this is going.
You think so? I just might surprise you.
You aren't going to surprise me.
I might.
You won't.
Believe what you want, Joe said, and started writing on his character page, chuckling as he did.
Dave sat there looking at Joe and hating himself because he knew he was going to regret it. Eventually, his curiosity got the better of him. Fine, Dave said, giving in against his better judgment. What is your example?
Joe looked up from his character sheet and seemed to be back in control of himself. What was that? Joe asked.
Dave sighed. You said the lower number might be represented by people like Gollum, who shone the light, and...
Joe waved him off. No, it wasn't that.
Just say it, Dave said.
You're right, you won't get it.
Just tell me!
No,
Just say it! Dave roared.
Joe looked at Dave, blinked, cleared his throat. Like you and your friend.
Get out. As Joe left, laughing all the way, Dave was filled with a mixture of relief and pride that he'd never felt before. It was strange and intoxicating. When his friends returned with pizza, Dave told them that he had kicked Joe out and that they were impressed. Well, not Emily, but Dave gave her a couple of bucks, took the Red Bull, said, "Thanks, beautiful. Let's play."
Oh, that was fun. And I assure you, the only time in my life where I've ever been cast as an alpha male.